4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting live from the Newsmax studio in New York City. A fusion of politics, commentary, entertainment, and sports. Steve and his team bring you the latest news and opinion now. Here is Steve Malzberg.
All right, folks, 2 days ago we had Congressman Peter King on, and he revealed to us that based on the new threats that are presenting themselves from the Middle East and people able to make bombs, quite possibly, that could be hidden in tubes of toothpaste or, not detectable through the various means that we traditionally detect bombs at airports. He said that the TSA might very well undertake new regulations and institute new rules and new inspection techniques. And now we're getting reports that that, in fact, has come to fruition and will be announced probably next week. So we'll keep an eye on that. Also, quite disturbing, the investigation into Sergeant Bergdahl and whether or not he deserted his post or was taken prisoner by the Taliban through a capture of some sort. You have people now who served with him, including platoon leaders, who have come forward and said he deserted. And it turns out that the investigation which is underway, nobody has talked to these soldiers who served with Sergeant Bergdahl. And they're saying, where is everybody? Where's the investigators? Why aren't they talking to us? Is this going to be a whitewash? Is the fix in, or are they just slow? Well, we shall see. I guess that's what we could say. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to be joined by Dr. Ron Paul, but we're both going to weigh in on what we're going to hear and see.
It is a significant game changer of sort of, you have this theme of corporations being people too. It's a huge blow to the Obama administration. This has been an awful 10 days. They were previously found to be in violation of the Fourth Amendment and privacy. Then they were found to be in violation of the separation of powers. And now they've been found to be in violation of the First Amendment and the religion clauses. I mean, you just don't want to get out of bed after a week like that.
All right. Well, maybe the president does. Maybe the president doesn't. We could certainly ask Dr. Ron Paul, former 12-term Texas congressman, former GOP presidential candidate and founder of Campaign for Liberty. And, of course, you could watch him on the Ron Paul channel. Hello, Congressman. How are you, sir?
Hello, Steve. Nice to be with you. I'm doing well.
Great. Always great to talk to you. All right. So so much to talk about here. So does the president want to get out of bed? And whether or not he wants to get out of bed based on his the losses in the Supreme Court recently, there's a new poll out today from Quinnipiac that shows that ranking the president since World War II, Barack Obama has the worst ranking. Ronald Reagan has the best. So another bit of bad news for the president.
Yeah, that takes some doing to be the worst already. So, you'd think with all his problems, he'd become a little more mellow and a little more cautious, but he becomes more aggressive, so he's more defensive, and I'm surprised at that, because I think he's doing excessively what most presidents do. They overstep their bounds, and I'm always complaining, as from a libertarian viewpoint, they're always doing too much. But I've never seen any of them be so arrogant about it, so in your face about it. Most of the presidents have always abused this executive order and executive power, but he gets right up there and he says, I got a pen and I got a telephone and the Congress won't act. If the Congress doesn't act, I am obligated to do it and I'm going to do it. He doesn't back off at all. If even if he were on the right side, it seems to me like his attitude would have him lowered in the polls. Let's assume that maybe he could have been correct, but he isn't, of course. But this attitude that I'm the boss and I'm the king, it sort of reminds you of a Republican president says, if the president doesn't, it's legal, But it looks like the courts are serving a function. I agree certainly on several of these rulings, and that is good. But we still have a long way to restore the real principles of personal liberty, even with this ruling, on Hobby lobbying.
Yeah.
It still doesn't go into the depths of what individual liberty is, and this is what I think is necessary sometimes. And Jonathan Turley just brought up the subject of who owns rights, corporations and the other things. But nevertheless, I guess they're not going to restore the Constitution with one ruling.
No, but in fact, Congressman, since 2012, there have been 13, not counting Hobby Lobby, 13 9-0 rulings against this administration from the U.S. Supreme Court, which is phenomenal.
No, that is good, and that means that but they say that the courts are independent, but the courts are very political. They know what's going on out there, and the courts go with the flow. So this means that our efforts, the efforts of so many in the conservative libertarian groups, we're having an effect. I think we have having an effect on foreign policy and monetary policy and the Federal Reserve, and now on civil liberties. So and I think the courts are starting to respond to this, and I would say that's a very good sign.
All right, let me ask you about, you talked about the president, the arrogant, in-your-face nature. On the very day that he lost the Hobby Lobby case, he came out after John Boehner told him that we're not going to take up immigration reform because we can't trust you to enforce the law. And he said, I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to instruct my Attorney General and a Homeland Security Director to tell me how far I could go, and I'm going to go there. Talk about what you're seeing. I mean, former Texas congressman, certainly Texas is on the fore there, right at the border, and these kids coming over the border. I mean, this is a huge crisis. We hear so many stories now about a congressman not being permitted to see these camps, about disease breaking out, these kids being transported all over the country to other camps. It's getting really scary.
Right, and I don't think anybody's happy with the policies. I'm not happy with it, but I don't think anybody's happy with Obama, his determination. But as a congressman living in Texas and also a physician, the health thing sort of strikes me as being very major, even over and above some of these detailed arguments on how we could improve our immigration policies. But I'm very concerned about this because we already have had many problems in Texas and Arizona where individuals come over. And, of course, one of my arguments for trying to stem the tide would be to remove the incentives and not to get free everything, free medical care and free education. But our hospitals had already been under siege by immigrants, and with these thousands, tens of thousands, who knows how many, and when you put them all together, this is what you can expect. You're going to see some very serious health problems, and we've already overburdened many hospitals, and then there's going to be this big argument, where are we going to get the money to do this? And, of course, Obama has already asked for $2 billion to help, but most of that he wants to send down to Nicaragua, and I just don't trust giving money to the governments down in Central America that they'll do what we need to have done to solve some of our problems.
So, I mean, these children, just one more on this, and the health aspect of it, we don't know their health history. We don't know if they're vaccinated to our standards. They probably aren't in many cases. I'm hearing fears of all kinds of the hepatitis, TB, Ebola. I mean, how do we keep a lid on all this?
No, you're not going to be able to. In a more simpler world in the 19th century when we did have a massive influx of immigrants, we were still cautious about diseases. They had to be held for a while, but it was systematic, and they were concerned about certain illnesses. But today, under these conditions, it just is essentially impossible to do this, and I don't see an easy answer to this. But all I know is that we spend way too much money worrying about the borders between Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan, all those places, and we don't seem to have any concern or policies that would be more sensible here at home.
Well, let me take you overseas. We have a situation now regarding Israel and the kidnapped 3 teenagers who were killed apparently by Hamas, according to Israel. One a dual citizenship as an American, and today we have have a Palestinian teenager who was killed, the media and even this administration seem to be jumping to the conclusion without much evidence that it was a retaliation killing of the Palestinian teenager. But that aside, you know, the whole Middle East just seems day after day after day, especially with the ISIS crisis in Iraq and Syria and the caliphate that seems to be forming. What, if anything, should this country do in your view?
Well, a lot sooner, a long time ago, we should have been following a non-interventionist foreign policy that the founders advised, non-intervention in the internal affairs of other nations, not being the policemen of the world. But now we are so much engaged, it almost becomes silly and ridiculous. So in Ukraine, we're fighting the Russians, and we're put on sanctions, and we're stirring up a battle there. At the same time, the Russians are sending in helicopters, and we're sending in helicopters trying to preserve a government that we created. And actually, the Iranians want to come in and help us out. Well, we don't like ISIS either, so we'll help you out. If you've ever seen a mixed bag, and we've been doing this. I mean, we've been involved over there in Iraq, you know, for 20 years, really, and a lot of killing's been going on. So I think the messier this gets, the stronger the case gets for us who believe in non-interventionism, where we try not to solve all these problems that are impossible to solve, and we dig a hole for ourselves. It costs a lot of money, a lot of people die, a lot of people come home sick, and we really have a mess.
One more for you. We have less than a minute, Congressman. It's really not enough time to do it justice, but the IRS scandal. Is anybody going to be held responsible, and how does this rank in the hierarchy of scandals that you've seen?
Well, I think this is probably one of the worst. Of course, that's a lot of competition out there for that. But when you have a taxing authority doing what if a business had done, they would have been probably in prison by now, you know, by destroying information and computers and all of these things that have gone on. It is such an outrage. And it also makes this very strong point that the government, if we're to have a limited government, they're supposed to, one of the designs by the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment, was to Congressman, well, look at what's happening. NSA and the IRS.
Congressman, to be continued. As you well know from the Ron Paul channel, the clock rules. Thank you, sir. Great talking to you. Take care. That's Ron Paul, ladies and gentlemen. Coming back.